one of the hallmarks of burnout, and we talk about this with mental fitness, it's the flexibility. And flexibility in terms of mental fitness is the ability to see options. And in my state of burnout, and like I said, it happened over years. I got tunnel vision. I lost sight of the fact that there were options that I had in the way that I was looking at things that would have led to a paradigm shift. Um, and I wasn't able to see that by myself. And working with someone, I think would have helped me to open my eyes to the fact that I didn't have to feel the way that I was feeling and that change was possible.
Hello and welcome to Radio, a podcast by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Ross Drakes. In this podcast, we share the stories of EO entrepreneurs, their personal path, experiences, and stories of what they've learned building their businesses and what drives them to keep going. Today on the podcast, I'm talking to Manuel Astruc. He's a psychiatrist. He's an EO Albany Capital Region member, and he is an accelerator graduate. Welcome to the podcast, Manuel.
And it is my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
So I ask everyone the same question as the kickoff. Can you give me your elevator pitch?
Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur and I am someone who has suffered from and overcome burnout. And now I am helping entrepreneurs suffering from burnout recover so that they get back their energy, their focus, so they can be successful in their business and their personal life.
The cool thing to do. I mean, take me back to the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. Was tiny baby Manuel like the guys like, you know what I want to do is I want to help people with burnout. Was that your dream when you were starting out? How did your entrepreneurial journey go?
No, so I was actually a rugged individualist. So when I became a psychiatrist, I had worked in inpatient psychiatry, transitioned to an outpatient private practice 30 years ago, and never wanted to have employees because of the headaches involved. I had, a full-time office manager and a part-time person to help her. And in medical school, they don't teach you anything about entrepreneurship or business, right? So the model that I had that was if I needed to make more money, I added more hours to my day. And over time, I was working 12-hour days, seeing patients 12 hours, Monday through Friday, 6 hours on Saturdays, and then 2 hours plus returning phone calls, sending in prescriptions. And I knew that this was not sustainable. And I hit a bottom, in 2008. I had seen this coming for a long time, gradually getting more depleted, more emotionally tired, more physically tired, losing my edge, no longer feeling effective at work. And as the psychiatrist, I'm the person that everybody's turning to for help. And I didn't really have other people that I could talk to. So it was like a treadmill where every day I was just running to keep up, knowing that there was going to be a crash at some point. And I hit that crash in September of 2008. And at that time, I was just absolutely miserable. In spite of having a successful practice, everything looked good on the outside. On the inside, I was dying. And my twin sister, Magdalena, had died the month before. So August 2008, she'd had a
Nice.
3-year fight with brain cancer. And this evening in September, I was looking at a picture of her. And in the picture, she's glowing, she's smiling. Can't tell, but she's wearing a wig because she was going through chemotherapy. And it was just so striking to me that she'd lived her life with such a grim prognosis, with a smile on her face and this incredible attitude of just grace. And now I was healthy, successful, and miserable. And that's when I drew a line in the sand. It was really a moment of truth for me, where I decided that I had to fight back from this depression. And over a year plus, I did that. Wrote a book about that experience. Started to explore different ways of looking at life and my practice, and this led to becoming much more interested in entrepreneurship and business, and ultimately led to joining EO.
I'm interested as you were talking. I remember a story. It was a couple of years back. I've been running my business now for 19 years, and I've had good times and I've had bad times. And at this point in my life, I was in a very particularly dark time. I was in the process of buying out a business partner, and we weren't agreeing, and there was a lot of sort of like fighting and trauma. And I remember I had friends coming over for dinner, and I love cooking for people. And I had the food on the table. My friends were about to arrive. I was excited. And then I realized that I'd forgotten to buy cream to like finish my meal. And this tiny thing was just enough to send me over the edge. Like my entire back seized up. I like had to go and lie on the floor, and I missed the entire dinner party because I'd like been running myself so unbelievably empty that that tiny little sort of thing that isn't actually really important in the bigger scheme of things at all was enough to sort of break me. Like how did you pull yourself out in that moment? Like, how do you actually go through the process of extracting yourself from that dark place?
I got lucky in some ways. I mean, first off, there was a commitment that no matter what, I was going to get out of this. But I started to make some choices that fortunately worked out. So, I mean, I'm supposed to have it all together. I'm the psychiatrist. I'm supposed to have answers. I didn't have answers for myself. But what I knew was that something had to change. So I looked at very low hanging fruit for myself. So one thing that I started off doing was I had been eating terrible, just grabbing fast food here and there where I could, when I could. And I made a decision. I was just going to clean up my breakfast. So that was something I could do. Just have a better breakfast instead of grabbing something on the go from a fast food place on my way into work. Started making a smoothie every day. I knew that exercise is important, and I've tried to exercise over the course of my life multiple times. I would exercise, for a week, and then it would fall off, and it was
Mm.
not sustainable. So I decided, I'm going to exercise for 3 minutes a day. I'm going to do a couple of jumping jacks, some push ups, a couple of crunches, 3 minutes a day. That's all I'm going to ask for myself, but I want to just stay consistent with that. And that's actually one of the best ways, to build a habit. I found out about this afterwards, studying habit formation, but starting with very small steps to install the habit and then kind of building from there. So it was a series of these small steps. I cleaned up negative energy from around me. And one of the things I loved listening to sports radio on the way into work, but sports radio had started to become something instead of talking about excellence, right? Human excellence and the things that sports can teach us. It became a drama show. It was all about controversies and it was nonsense. I turned that off and I started listening to podcasts. Loved them. It was 2008, so for me that was an introduction to this world where I could just tune in to entrepreneurs, see the amazing things that they were building, what they were doing, their attitudes. There was so much to learn. And, that mindset of turning off negativity and just having a tribe of virtual mentors that was available to me 24/7 when I wasn't working was part of the breadcrumb trail looking back that helped to start pull things out.
It's interesting, like there's small shifts that make a huge difference. I mean, how did those small shifts lead you into entrepreneurship? How did that lead you into thinking about your business and moving away from selling time?
Well, it took a while to move into entrepreneurship. My burnout got better. I mean, one of the things that developed as a result of listening to entrepreneurs in podcasts was this concept that other people have called the adjacent possible. So an adjacent possible is if you imagine that you're in a room with four doors, that's your life. You can walk through one door without too much effort, resources, or time, and explore a room that's next to you. And I started to explore adjacent possibles next to my psychiatry practice. So one thing that I did early on was I started to look at information products, and I wonder if I could make an information product about bipolar disorder or something. I started to give talks in the area about psychiatric illness, bipolar disorder. That didn't lead to too much, but I found that I really enjoyed public speaking, which I didn't know anything about. So through a series of these adjacents and exploring things, I knew that I wanted to join EO. I'd seen it, and all of a sudden a message popped up, on Facebook that there was a accelerator program that was going to be started in the Albany region, and I was primed to start. And my mindset had changed from I don't want any employees, I don't want the hassle, to I want to scale, I want to grow, I want to focus more on coaching, helping entrepreneurs, and I want to be working on stepping back a little bit from my private practice and moving into coaching entrepreneurs who are suffering from burnout.
You're an interesting business. I think you're the first psychiatrist that I've met in a year, the first person in this kind of industry. What's it like, coming from this world into entrepreneurship? What do you see? And I obviously, like, there's the lens of the burnout. Like, how do you? Or what's it like coming into this entrepreneurial world from the world that you had worked in for so long?
So it's been a pleasure, being around entrepreneurs. That's really who I consider my tribe, my people. I much prefer to spend time with entrepreneurs than with other psychiatrists or my medical colleagues. I think that they tend to be much more positive in their outlook and focused on getting results and adding value to the world. It's one of the reasons that I love working with entrepreneurs is because if I help an entrepreneur, it's going to help them to help their family, their communities, their employees, the ripple effects of helping an entrepreneur. It really helps more people to help more people. And my mission is to help change the world that way, right? Help more people to help more people.
I like that. There's something you just said now for the second time. You're saying like a positive thing. You tuned out sports radio because it wasn't positive, and now you're saying that you find that entrepreneurs are more positive. What do you think is there something in that? Is like positivity something that you think about that's important in your work?
Yeah, and what's interesting is when you look at burnout occurs across a continuum. And I think sometimes the positivity can get in the way of identifying early stages of burnout. And these are the entrepreneurs that call the I'm fine entrepreneurs, right? So they're maintaining a good attitude, they're working hard, but you know what? They're more tired than they used to be. They're less decisive than they used to be. They're a step slower with their capacity and capabilities at work. They're showing up at work at a version of themselves that's not their ideal. So this is a performance gap, between where they are capable of functioning and where they're actually functioning, and they haven't hit a bottom, right? So they haven't gotten to the parts of burnout where you absolutely can't go on. You've got to make a change. And these individuals, because they're positive and because they're still functioning, they're settling for this version of themselves. And when I talk to them, you do have symptoms, you do have traits that are consistent with the performance gap where you are, where you have been, where you could be. They nod their heads, they stay positive, but it's a challenge to get them to see that they can tune up the engine, right? If it's a high performance car, there's something that you can do to get that car's performance back. That positivity sometimes says, "Yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm okay."
I suffer from this. I suffer from eternal optimism. So when things aren't going right or anything, I'll probably hold on a bit longer than I should because I believe that there's a positive thing out there. You talked about the signs of burnout and the continuum of it. Like, what are those signs? What is that continuum like in terms of burnout?
So, you know, Burnout was identified as an occupational syndrome resulting from poorly managed workplace stress by the World Health Organization. And they give three core symptoms of burnout. Number one is exhaustion, mental and physical exhaustion. Number two is bitterness and cynicism. There's an attitude change that happens. The reason you do what you do for the people that you do it for, all of a sudden, instead of, being grateful to do this, they become a thorn in your side. And the last one is starting to lose professional efficacy. And with all of these, symptoms, there are mild forms, and then there's the more severe forms. We talked about the I'm fine entrepreneur who in early burnout can be experiencing some of the fatigue, attitude changes, getting a little more bitter, getting a little more cynical, losing some effectiveness, but they're still functioning. And at the extreme, it's you hit a bottom and you just can't go on anymore.
And how did you? I mean, so you said you diagnosed yourself. Like, how did you diagnose yourself? How far down that path were you, and how can people start to see this in themselves?
Yeah, so I was at the end, right? So literally I was at a point where I was gonna have to make some radical changes or I was not gonna be able to go on. If burnout is left untreated, you're gonna get depression and more functional disabilities as a result of that. So I kind of knew what I was getting into, and I'd seen it coming. So definitely a self-diagnosis, but it was no surprise to me that this was what I was dealing with. And I think in terms of recognition for entrepreneurs, trying to catch things at an early stage, are you getting more tired than you used to? Do you wake up and you're not as refreshed as you used to be mentally, physically? Is your curiosity, is your, interest in doing things? Are you having to work harder to do something that used to come pretty easily for yourself? Are you finding that bitterness, that reactivity to demands and stresses kind of increasing? And are you noticing that slight slippage where, that effectiveness at work, that making decisions when they need to be made, you know, reactivity emotionally, losing options at work because you're getting kind of tunnel vision. Those are early warning signs that burnout is kind of moving along and that something should be done.
How do you tell the difference between a burnout and being a parent of a young child? Because those two things sound very similar.
No, no. So you're right, and with the continuum, it's kind of like how do you tell the difference between someone who's kind of tall and really tall, right? So if they're, really tall, we can all agree, but on a continuum, do you draw that line of this is moving beyond being a parent, being an entrepreneur, grinding, going hard, and I think that, first is the awareness that there is this line where you can get into the red zone and it's starting to detract from your performance. And just staying open to not letting your performance suffer and your relationships suffer as that line gets crossed. The areas that I have people look at is that energy level when you first get up. Are you getting up and looking forward to your day, or are you starting to dread the day? The level of curiosity that you normally have, how is that? And your patience, your emotional reactivity, how's that going? And if over a period of a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're taking a look at that the same way that you look at your balance sheet or your bank statement, and measuring where you are in this continuum, and the answer is that you're depleted in these, yeah, it's probably more than just parenting. With the entrepreneurs I work with, we have a mental fitness score sheet that we work on, kind of measuring on a weekly basis. Where are you in terms of your what we call mental fitness, strength, endurance, flexibility, recovery?
And what I mean for the people that are listening, what are some of the things that they can do to help fix some of this?
So we look at Recovery, I think that's one that is easy to neglect. So in the same way that athlete, they can't just be doing their best workout ever every single day without having some recovery time for their body, right? So recovery for entrepreneurs, sleep is one of the biggest non-negotiables. Getting adequate sleep. Exercise is key for recovery, and what a lot of people tend to do is, rather than looking at these active recovery processes, and there's more processes we can get into, but we look at passive recovery that is really a way of disconnecting and numbing out. So scrolling is not recovery. Having a couple of drinks at night is not recovery. Binge watching a series is not recovery. All of those things can calm down your nervous system, but it's not really working to reset it.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with doing any of those things individually, but when we're using them as a way of kind of calming our nervous systems down, as a way to recover, that's not going to be effective. You're actually building a deficit.
So you're saying sleep and exercise are the two biggest pieces, and then your second one is building an actual recovery. What does actual recovery look like for you? What is the things that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the sleep and the exercise are the two biggest levers. They're pretty easy. They're pretty straightforward. They get talked about all the time, but they're also easy to neglect, right? So, sleep when you've got deadlines, when you've got a lot of things going on, when you've got a young kid, we don't have to sleep 8 hours. Right, I can get by on 6 hours. I can get by on 5.5 hours, but that's a drain on the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that's actually working to make decisions, emotionally regulate, keep energy, and sustain attention and focus. So they're easy, but also easy to give up, right? Things that are easy to do are also easy not to do.
What's it if action followed knowledge, we'd all have six packs.
No, that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's exactly right. That's
yeah.
exactly right.
Okay, so tell me, I mean, tell me, like, come back to your journey in terms of you identified that you're burning out, you started to sort of restructure your business. Like, what is tell me about the business journey from selling hours into the business that you have now. What are some of the things that you've done?
So when I started with EO, I gave up this idea of being a, kind of rugged individualist. I've been working to hire other practitioners into the practice. As always, there's stumbles along the way. You try one model, you try another, but it's the idea of scaling, having other people who can do the work that I used to do. It's allowed me to cut back hours here, put some hours more into administration, but my workload has gone from probably 65 hours a week to closer to 40 in terms of actual patient contact hours during the week. I've got three nurse practitioners, have a fourth one that's going to be coming on here. And one of the things that I've been very excited about too is that I was able to add a technology to the private practice to treat depression called transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS. So, for people who haven't heard about TMS, in psychiatry, in medicine, what we have available to treat depression besides talk therapy have been antidepressants. And antidepressants work about 65, 67% of the time, maybe 70 in some studies. But there's a large group of people who don't respond well to medications. Those are the people who come to see me in my psychiatric practice, because if the primary care doctor has started meds and they've worked, I don't tend to see them. But for the treatment resistant individuals, for years, we've been stacking medications together. We've been adding different groups of medications. We worked really hard with our patients to try to get that 30% who haven't gotten better back to
Mm.
their level of functioning. TMS came into the scene 15 years ago. It was developed in England. It's a form of treatment where we take a very strong magnet, and when you pulse a magnet rapidly, you get an electrical field. and we can aim that electrical field very precisely at the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And as a result of stimulating that prefrontal cortex, which is also where burnout lives, that 30% of patients who haven't responded well to medications, 70% of those respond incredibly well to TMS. So that's been an exciting addition to what we've done at the office to help serve more people more efficiently and with the newest technologies available.
That's super cool. It's trying to remember the name of it. There was a chair that I sat in that had magnets all the way up and down it, and they sort of vibrated at high frequency and sort of put your body in fight or flight mode. And then by the time
Yeah.
there was like a deep relaxation that kind of came. It sounds like a similar thing. Is that how it works? Huh?
So it's a little different because, you know, to get a electrical stimulation to the very surface of the brain, we have to cross the scalp and then the skull, and then we get to the surface of the brain. So we're using a pretty big burst of energy that's very localized
Mm,
rather than generalized. The treatments themselves have evolved over time. For most of the time TMS has been around, it was you needed 36 sessions over 36 days, so it was about a 6-week program. Stanford developed an accelerated protocol where we could get the same amount of benefit in a 5-day course of treatment. And there's recently been a protocol where we can get the full benefits after 1 day of treatment. So it's a little different than what you're talking about. And the effectiveness and safety of this treatment is been pretty remarkable. And for depression, it's still under-recognized, and I think in terms of burnout, I've had a handful of my EO peers who I've encouraged to try it, and we've had just incredible results. If I can tell the story of one of my friends
mm,
who was in my forum. So Chris has given me permission to talk about this. So Chris was in my forum for 2 years. He's the owner of a digital marketing agency and very successful. Big vacations with his family a couple of times a year, and he would talk about having a direction he could take his business in that he knew would be incredibly profitable. But when he talked about this, he would rub his face and say, "And it's so much work. And I know how hard it was to get this agency up and running. And I just don't know that I can do that." And he talked about that a handful of times. And I would nudge him that this so much work, this fatigue that he was talking about, was probably kind of fitting this I'm fine entrepreneur who's a little burnt out. And I encouraged them to think about trying TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. And he said no, and he said no. And then finally, to get me off his back, he said, okay, let me try it. Let me do this. He did the accelerated protocol 5 days. And at the end of that time, what was noticed by other people was that he was smiling more. He was more engaged. He said that this decision that he had found to be profoundly overwhelming, he was able to lean into, make a commitment to get started with that. At home, he said he didn't realize that he was coming home and in his words, he couldn't wait to go to bed. After treatment, he said he was interested in everybody's days. Like, how was your day? He wanted to engage with his family in a way that he hadn't in years. He's a runner, and he was running through this I'm fine phase of things. But he
mm,
said that his runs took on a new quality after he got treatment. He said that all of a sudden he was running and he was just amazed by the feel of the breeze on his face, the look of the leaves on the trees, the clouds in the sky. All of a sudden he was having this different experience of really being in awe and noticing these parts of the environment that he had been kind of oblivious to. And after he finished, he told me that he had wanted to get me off his back. He didn't want the treatment to work. He said, "I just thought that this was how I am and how things were going." But he was, grateful to get the benefits.
That's cool. So what I take from this is that I can just run my tank on complete empty and then come and do the 24-hour accelerated program and bounce myself back up again. Or is that the wrong lesson to take from all of this?
Well, I don't think that you have to get all the way to empty, maybe 3/4, right? But, at some point, right, the availability of whether it's TMS, whether it's coaching, burnout is not just about suffering. It's not something that we have to put up with. The analogy of a high performance sports car engine that you start off with, that you just kind of thrilled to be driving, that slowly loses its power, and you just accommodate to this car that was thrilling, that now is getting the job done, but is no longer producing at the level that it's capable of. That engine can get overhauled, and we can get that performance gap. That performance gap from where you are to where you could be or once were, it's something that we don't have to put up with. And you can wait for that gap to be really large, or you can do it when it's not quite so large.
I love that. So if you could go back to that 2008 Manuel and say, hey, like here's something that I know, here's a lesson. Like what would you like? What lesson would you like to share with that version of yourself that you know now?
One of the hallmarks of burnout, and we talk about this with mental fitness, it's the flexibility. And flexibility in terms of mental fitness is the ability to see options. And in my state of burnout, and like I said, it happened over years. I got tunnel vision. I lost sight of the fact that there were options that I had in the way that I was looking at things that would have led to a paradigm shift. And I wasn't able to see that by myself. And working with someone, I think would have helped me to open my eyes to the fact that I didn't have to feel the way that I was feeling, and that change was possible.
It's a profound lesson. And I guess I love that idea that the door's right there, that you can you can open that door and explore that thing right next door. It's not that far away.
No, that's right. The adjacent possibles were right next to us.
And how do you think if your sister was looking down at you, what do you think she would feel about like where you're at today, the version of yourself that you've become?
So I think, and I think about Magdalena. I have conversations with Magdalena in my head, almost on a daily basis. I'll walk out of the house and I'll say, "Oh, I forgot my cell phone," and it's like, "Oh, Magdalena, thanks for reminding me." So I think Magdalena's smiling. She's glowing. She's super happy. So absolutely.
I mean, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's always lovely for me to see people and meet people who have kind of gone deep on something and spent the time to truly understand it, because I think it's not as frequent in the world as you often get. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Thank you for sharing your time. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you and to find out about TMS, like how where would they go to do that?
So two things. If you're interested in kind of the journey and what I learned, and some of the ways that I think about getting over burnout, I wrote a book called Happiness Rules, and that's available wherever books are sold. In terms of getting in touch with me, LinkedIn is probably the platform that's the easiest to just kind of DM me, and happy to talk.
Mel, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for giving up your ticket to the GRIP conference and sending Catherine there so that I can meet her.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who you think might need to hear it. I believe that sharing actionable knowledge is one of the most generous things that a human can do. The show is produced by me, Ross Drakes. I'm a proud entrepreneur and a member of EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. If you are an entrepreneur and want more information, go to eonetwork.org. And with that, we'll catch all of you in the next one. Thank you for listening, and bye-bye.